This is Margie Fink with Transfiguring Adoption. Transfiguring Adoption creates media and resources to help nurture and grow foster and adoptive families. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Regina Kupecky. Regina is a licensed social worker, author, and trainer who's worked in the field of adoption for over 35 years. Thank you for joining us today, Regina.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I first became familiar with your work. We were on a family vacation, and we were just getting ready to hit the road to go home, and we stopped in an outlet mall, and I found this book called Adopting the Hurt Child, and I thought, this looks really interesting, and I picked it up, and I tell you what, we had about a 5.5-hour drive home that day, and we were probably halfway through it when I had just soaked through that book. I had dog-eared pages, just kind of soaking in all the wisdom in that book. I learned so much that really just changed the way I was parenting our own hurt children. But tell us a bit about your experience first, and then we'll talk about some of your print resources.
Okay. Well, I started working in adoption, placing infants for Catholic Charities, back in the old days when we were down to like 60 babies a year or something. You know, when you were 2 years old, you were too old to be adopted.
Right.
And then I worked for Northeast Ohio Adoption Services, which is a private agency that places public agency children. And kind of Kelly girls, we used to call ourselves. When you need more help, we'll come in and help you.
Uh-huh.
And then I heard people speak about attachment and issues and how kids act and how you should parent, etc. And then it was like a giant light bulb went off in my head and said, this is like every kid I work with. And then I met Dr. Keck, and I started working part-time for him, and then I switched to working full-time for him. And we wrote Adopting the Hurt Child together and Parenting the Hurt Child. And then I wrote a series of workbooks later.
So tell us a little bit about the two books you wrote with Dr. Keck, what your motivations were, and a bit about what parents can find in those books.
Well, I think our chief motivation was to educate parents. We really wrote it so that parents would enjoy it. It's not real technical with 5,000 footnotes or anything. Because we just felt so many people were floundering and they couldn't find people who understood the problem. Because if you go to a therapist who doesn't understand adoption and attachment, most of what they do doesn't help. It's not the therapist's fault. It's like if you're going to the best cardiologist but you have diabetes.
Right.
Just in the wrong place. And so we thought, well, we can't see everybody in the world, so maybe we could at least, explain what's going on. And then we thought with Adopting the Hurt Child, that was very self-explanatory and life was good. And then all these parents said, okay, now what are we supposed to do? We don't get it. We understand the theory, but we don't understand the practice. And that's when we wrote Parenting the Hurt Child with more ideas of why traditional parenting doesn't work and some things you can do that might work and how to get some of the anger out of your family and how to nurture more because nurturing is what's going to cure the problem. It's not punishment. It's not going to cure the problem.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved about, and I later read Parenting the Hurt Child as well. One of the things I loved about Adopting the Hurt Child was just kind of the breakdown of what some of the behaviors are that, seem abnormal to parents, but are really, like we in our house call it abnormally normal. It's normal for the kid's situation and their experiences. But, you guys really explained what causes those behaviors, why they come about, in ways that were really enlightening and really made a lot of sense. And that was one of the things that really impacted me because we were fairly early in our journey, and some of the just obvious lying and some of the stealing or just that lack of cause and effect thinking. You and Dr. Keck explained that really well.
Right. They don't have it, so quit being mad at them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's hard because we live in a culture that really doesn't recognize mental health issues as real, I think. If you adopted a child who was blind, nobody would expect that if you loved them a lot, they would suddenly see.
Right.
But you adopt a child with mental health issues, and people think, well, if you love them, they'll just suddenly not have mental health issues.
Right. And these kids, you know, we've got 4 beautiful children, and I had a school psychologist just a couple months ago ask me, yeah, but how does PTSD affect them in the classroom? You know, and they're looking at these children and they see, you know, the effects of trauma really look like defiance or attention deficit disorder or, you know, something else. And that's how they treat them, and that's not the way they need to be treated. So your work is really, really important. Tell us a bit about the different workbooks you have.
Well, I first wrote a book called Foster to Adoption, Michael and Angela's Journey, because there wasn't really, there's not very many children's books about children adopted older from foster care. You know, a lot of adoption books are about animals, which is fine. I think if you don't want to make children one race or another or one sex or another, so they make them squirrels or ducks or bears or porcupines, which is fine. I mean, kids like that. And I wanted to make it a workbook so that kids could put their own stuff in there. So it's a little sibling group, Angela and Michael, and they get separated at one point. And, you know, how angry Michael is when he gets adopted. And then we ask the kids questions. It's sort of like a journal workbook, coloring book, and we didn't make the pictures colored so that you can color anybody anything you want. Obviously, it's not going to fit every child, how many foster homes they've been in and everything, but the kids really like it because it's someone like them, and parents are really surprised how they answer some of the questions. And then I was asked by, why did the name just went on my brain? Anyway, for the publisher to write a series of workbooks, so I invented an adoption club, and the kids in the adoption club are all adopted different ways, internationally as infants, by kin, from foster care, and they discuss different issues and there's little projects to do in each book. So, if they're talking about how they feel about the birth parents, they make a little pie chart and divide it up what part's sad, what part's angry, what part's glad, scared, and the kids like to do things, so they kind of like to do the little projects, and there's jigsaw puzzle project and another one, and but the kids remain the same in each book, and a lot of the kids like that because they find somebody who's like them, and they're not quite as particular as adults. I mean, if they were adopted internationally and they're a girl from China, we have a girl from China in there, but if you were adopted from Korea, the kid's not going to say, well, she's from China and I'm from Korea, so I don't have anything to do with her.
Right.
And you can't put everybody in the book, or you'd have 5,000 characters, because adoption is And I think a lot of parents do that. You know, sometimes when I'm giving talks, you know, I'll say something, about the orphanage in Russia, and somebody will say, well, but my child came from Bulgaria, so it's different. Well, maybe, not really.
Right.
It's still an institution. So.
Yeah, and while every institution is different, still the effects of institutionalization are pretty general.
Right, right. Good institutions are better than bad institutions, but good institutions aren't good.
Right. Yeah.
And the workbook, again, I sort of thought, I hear from so many parents who just don't have any resources. There's nobody around who understands the kids' issues. There's nobody, so they feel pretty out there alone. So I thought, well, maybe this will help open up some doors and let the kids talk about the birth parents or about their siblings or some of the other issues that we cover in the books.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what our website is all about, is getting the parents the resources so they can help nurture the kids, help them grow, help them heal, and bond and connect. So these sound like absolutely, I've not seen those workbooks. I just read about them for the first time the other day, and they sound fabulous. And just something that a lot of the parents that look at our site would really appreciate. So where can parents find those workbooks?
Well, they're on Amazon.
Okay.
Yep.
We will get them all linked up when we publish the blog, and we'll also get them on our book list so that parents can get to those. Also, my husband and I listened to your webinar recently that was hosted by Adoptive Families. And again, we love how down to earth you are, and some of the things that you talk about bringing humor and just really speak to us. And it's a lot the way we try to parent. So do you do speaking engagements around the country? Do you just generally do webinars and stick around Ohio?
I'm going to be in Buffalo and in Albany this summer. I'm not very good at running around promoting myself. So if somebody calls me and we can do it, I do it. But I don't really like to pursue it. I'm still working.
Right.
The Attachment and Bonding Center of Ohio closed last year. Dr. Keck passed away unexpectedly 15 months ago. But we opened a new office, the Adoption and Attachment Therapy Partners, which we kind of laughed. Same people, new furniture.
Right.
So I still am seeing clients. And in Ohio, we're really lucky. If any of you listeners are in Ohio, there's post-adoption money available to pay for therapy.
And that was going to be my next question, was for listeners who are located close to you in Ohio there, what services are available?
Well, we have a parent support group, and we do neurofeedback. I don't, because I never got trained, but that's very helpful with a lot of the kids. And we also can offer a QEEG, which gets read by a medical doctor, which actually looks at the brain of the child to see what's going on in there and what connections we can build on. And then we do post-adoption therapy.
Gotcha. So do you do kind of individual or whole family or a mix of both?
The whole family's involved. The parents, 90% of the time, are in the room with the kid because we're trying to build attachment between the parents and the child. Right. So if the child's going to be upset or angry, or the parents need to be there. And we work with the parents a lot. Like if we think the parents are doing something that is not helpful, we're not going to discuss that in front of the child because it just gives the child power. But, it's hard because parents often come in very angry and confused, and sometimes it sounds like we're saying just let the child do whatever they want, which is not what we're saying. But I think when parents are so angry, it really makes attachment impossible because who wants to attach to an angry parent, even though the child makes you angry? Which is just their defense because they are scared to you. So,
right.
It's very confusing. It's the opposite of practically every kind of parenting there is.
Do you do any work with the parents as far as, I've seen it in my own life, once you start parenting these kids, some of your own attachment issues and your own past trauma really gets brought up and it starts to trigger your own issues. Do you need to do any work with the parents to help them kind of work through?
Well, we do a little, but if we need ongoing therapy, somebody else in the office has, like if I'm seeing your child, I can't see the parent also.
Oh, yeah.
As a therapy person.
Yeah.
I mean, as a client.
Right. Yeah.
I see them as a parent. So somebody else would see them as a client, or they could, a lot of parents do find therapies helpful, and they go to wherever they want to go.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Some of the parents have started doing neurofeedback also on themselves. I mean, obviously, you just don't do it on yourself. You find out what's wrong. And but they found that it's really helpful for them as well. Yeah, because a lot of the kids just trigger things that happen to the parents and their child.
I also see you have a curriculum, My Brother, My Sister, Sibling Relationships and Adoption and Foster Care, and then a resource pamphlet, Siblings Are Family Too. We actually, in our home, this is a huge thing for us because we have siblings, bio-siblings who are separated from our kiddos, and that impacts them daily. What do you see in your practice as far as those impacts on kiddos?
Well, one thing I was kind of surprised when I wrote that curriculum, I was at some conference, I can't even remember what, and it was still rough. My film and stuff was still rough. And I asked a few people if they'd look at it with me, just to give their opinions. They were therapists and social workers. And so we're sitting in this room watching this, and then there was dead silence. And I said, I'm thinking, is it really that bad? And they all said it never occurred to them that there were sibling issues, that if a parent brought in a single child, they adopted little Johnny, they assumed little Johnny was their only child. And so they never talked about their siblings that they were separated from, nothing. And I was just blown away because I think it's 85% of children who are adopted have siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just, every sibling can't be with every sibling for lots of reasons, and that's in the curriculum. And so I really wrote the curriculum to try to encourage agencies to educate parents about sibling issues and what they could do and how that sometimes triggers things. Like you might not know it's their sibling's birthday, and that might just make them very angry or very sad. And it depends on the child. Sometimes children, when they're sad, they act out and they punch holes in the wall. Some act in and do things like cut. But to acknowledge their siblings, to talk about them, just little things like that. So it's really a curriculum. I mean, it's got a DVD and PowerPoint and handouts and a trainer manual. The resource guide is from Siblings Are Family Too. It's just a little, it's from Three Rivers Adoption. And
so the curriculum is more towards agencies, correct? Right. And workers.
Yeah.
And then Siblings Are Family Too, is that?
It's just a little pamphlet. It's like a 25-page pamphlet.
Who's the target for that one?
Parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. If you could tell foster parents one thing, what would that be?
Stop being angry.
Yes.
That they can do a lot of damage when they ask for child's removal. Because I think when kids keep getting removed, that's just what they're going to do. They're going to go in an adoptive home and act like the same way to see, because they can't believe anyone's going to keep them because no one's kept them. I mean, we've seen kids who have been in 15, 25 homes.
Yeah. What would you tell a parent that believes there's no hope for their child or family?
Oh, dear. Yes, there is. There's always hope. I've seen some very disturbed children get so much better. Kids who were very, very violent who are no longer violent. I mean, I think you have to figure out what to celebrate, too. Like, if one of the kids we work with graduates from high school, to me that's like somebody else getting a PhD. Like, how in the world does he get up and do that? And I think you have to become educated. There's a new book out, I don't know if you've read it, called The Girl Behind the Door. And
I've not heard of that one.
Okay, and I forget who it's by. I want to say Brooke, but it might be Brooks. And it's a little, I'm not doing a spoiler. The whole title is A Father's Search in regard something to his daughter's suicide. And she was adopted
I think I did hear of that. Yeah.
Very young. It's an excellent book. And he goes to, a bunch of professionals who, somebody mentions adoption attachment disorder, but then gives him some neurophysic book he can't understand or something. And at the end, it's kind of sad. He said all the answers were a Google search away. I just didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and I think a lot of people just get stuck in their, I'm not going to change. The child's going to change. I don't want to parent that way. What if, I have to parent them differently than I parent my birth children? I don't want to do that. And a child doesn't even have any hope if you're not going to, learn about their disorder and figure out how to parent differently.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I've found...
Again, I think it's that mental health, physical health thing. If I gave you a child who has leukemia, you wouldn't say, I refuse to learn about leukemia. And I'm supposed to care for him, and yes, I will care for him differently than I care for my birth children, because he's got leukemia and he needs help.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know how some of these kids breathe. If all this stuff happened to me, I think I'd be in a cave.
What's encouraged you about foster care and adoption over the years, like changes that you've seen? And
I think what encourages me to keep working is most of the families get better. Even sometimes when the children don't get better, the parents can function better, and the other kids in the family are all better because they understand the problem. I think the turnover, one of the big problems is the turnover in foster care and adoption workers, and so nobody really gets the education to you have to understand attachment issues to explain it to somebody. And, so many workers don't even know what it is, or they make, like some people make things up. Like we've gotten calls from parents, we understand you don't take children until they're 8. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not true. We see kids who are 2 and 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's what my worker said. Well, that you can't have attachment disorder until you're 10. What are you talking about? You get attachment disorder before you're 3.
Yeah.
So that's kind of discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, in terms of education, when I first started working with kids from foster care, our agency we made up our own curriculum, and parents would come and say, I can go to other agencies and not have to come to education. We go, and our director was, fine. If that's what you want to do, go ahead. And now I think, agencies try to educate people. And I think it's just like, I don't think they necessarily do a bad job, like you mentioned. Like, I had this gay couple, and in Ohio at that time, you couldn't get married, so one person adopted, the other person co-parented. And they kept saying the agency never told us, Well, the other co-parent person decided to adopt, went back through the classes, and she came home going, they did tell us, look at this handout. It says right here, here's the attachment cycle. They did tell us. We weren't listening because we didn't get it.
Right.
Sometimes I think, we should open up the pre-service to post-adoption and say, if you want to come back and go over sexual abuse again, come on back. I mean, it doesn't cost that long. But we kind of dump people. It's like, now you've adopted, congratulations, goodbye.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big need for more post-adoption services.
We will make sure to link up all the, Amazon, the pamphlet and those resources. Are those available on Amazon as well, or do you need to go to Three Rivers Adoption?
You have to go to Three Rivers Adoption in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 412, the phone number is 412, I imagine they have a website, 471-8722. It's like $2.
That's all the questions that I had. Is there anything that you would like to add, or anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
Well, I think another important component is to try to find some support. If there's not a support group, just find one other family that maybe you can trade kids once in a while. I know respite's often a big problem. People need it, but it's not really available. Even if you have the money, sometimes you can't find anybody.
Yeah.
And to, think outside the box. None of us were adopted, but there were 5 of us, and my grandfather lived with us. And every once in a while, my parents would say they were cleaning the garage on Saturday. We all disappeared because we didn't want to help. And then I come to find out, years later, that they actually went in the garage with a thermos of coffee and some, donuts or something, and sat and talked to each other in the car. And they knew we wouldn't bother them because we wouldn't have to help. And my mother goes, didn't you notice the garage was never got clean? And I said, no, I never noticed the garage was clean. So, yes, you'd like cruise free in the Caribbean, but maybe you can get 15 minutes to drink a cup of coffee. You can't, you just have to figure, and it's hard to think when you're so exhausted and so overwhelmed. And that's why I think a buddy family or a support group can really help. Our support group, a lot of the moms do respite for each other.
Yeah.
They know I'll take your kid one weekend, you take my kid one weekend. And then we have a mom who adopted. Her youngest is already in college, and so she knows what their issues are and stuff. And she'll do respite, and if you can pay her, she takes the money, and if you can't pay her, she doesn't charge you. So, you have to reach out, and that's very hard. A lot of our parents get very isolated because they're so embarrassed about how their kid's acting. They can't go to church because the kid acts out, and they take them to a restaurant and they can't do that, and they just become so isolated, which is not good for the family or themselves, or it's not good for anybody.
Well, I want to respect your time, and but I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. And
have a wonderful Easter.
You too.
Okay.
And thanks again.